This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans! It's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. The 1980s have often been called the second golden age of tag team wrestling due to the abundance of awesome teams. Unfortunately, with so many great teams, some very good teams have been overlooked. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at 10 more overlooked and underrated 80s tag teams. Before we get started though, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. The Powers of Pain. The Warlord and the Barbarian were one of many tag teams that seemed to be an attempt to piggyback off the success of the Road Warriors. Unlike the copycat teams, the Powers of Pain looked just as big and bad as Hawk and Animal, their only drawback being limited microphone skills. Nonetheless, the Warlord and the Barbarian's run in Jim Crockett Promotions featured a brutal feud against Hawk and Animal, with the Powers of Pain actually laying out the roadies in a kayfabe attack during a weightlifting competition. The Powers of Pain and Ivan Koloff defeated the Road Warriors and Dusty Rhodes for the NWA Six-Man World Tag Team Championship. Rumor has it the Powers of Pain balked at wrestling in a scaffold match against the Road Warriors, and who can blame them, which led to their jump to the WWF. Their WWF run got off to a bad start, as the promotion booked them as babyfaces. Their double turn with Demolition at Survivor Series balanced things out, but unfortunately their pairing with Mr. Fuji wasn't enough, and the WWF eventually split them up. The Pretty Young Things. Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett's Continental Wrestling Association, CWA, was a hotbed of tag team wrestling, and the CWA helped launch the 1980s second golden age of tag team wrestling by creating the Fabulous Ones and the Rock and Roll Express. Another memorable team was a combination of Norvell Austin and Coco Ware, aka the Pretty Young Things, PYTs. Unless you spent the 1980s in a coma, you know the team's name was a shout-out to Michael Jackson's hit song PYT. Just to drive the point home, the two grapplers wore red leather jackets similar to the King of Pop, and each wore a single white glove. The team had room for championship gold and held CWA's AWA Southern Tag Team Championship 3 times, and later, Championship Wrestling from Florida's NWA United States Tag Team Championship 1 time. The PYTs, aka the PYT Express, also worked at World Class Championship Wrestling, challenging the Fantastics unsuccessfully for the American Tag Team Championship. The PYT's feud with the Fabulous Ones in Memphis was arguably their best remembered program. In a 2009 Q&A with Slam Wrestling, Coco Ware shared his thoughts on working with Norvell Austin. Norvell was a lot older than me, and he taught me a lot of the ropes and stuff. I watched how he did things and stuff like that. I learned a lot from him, and it really paid off in my wrestling career. Coco credits Jerry the King Lawler with developing the PYTs. He's a genius when it comes down to putting teams together and giving them managers and stuff like that back then. He had an incredible mind, a creator. The PYTs split up in 1985 as Coco returned to singles competition, eventually making his way to the WWF. Jerry Blackwell and Ken Patera. Mention 1980s AWA tag teams, and you'll probably hear names like the East-West Connection, Jesse Ventura and Adrian Adonis, the High Flyers, Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, the Midnight Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, and of course, the Road Warriors. However, for whatever reason, the powerhouse team of Jerry Blackwell and Ken Patera tends to be overlooked. That's a mistake, as both men were not only real-life powerhouses, but solid workers. Ken Patera notes in his memoir, Weight of the World, despite being a super heavyweight at almost 500 pounds, Blackwell was a very agile and gifted worker, able to throw a great standing dropkick. As far as Patera is concerned, Blackwell was underrated and he had seen it all. He had been there and done that and was the epitome of what you would call a grizzled ring veteran. Fast forward to the 1980s, and Blackwell became a main event star in the AWA. He feuded with guys like Mad Dog Vachon and Hulk Hogan, and he was given the name the Rattlesnake because of his quick speed and aggression in the ring. Although Blackwell slowed down with age, and also due to the toll his weight took on his body, he remained a marketable star. Eventually, Ken was paired with Jerry Blackwell after Blackwell's manager, Sheikh Adnan Al-Kaisi, bought out Ken's contract from manager Bobby the Brain Heenan. According to Patera, Al-Kaisi could no longer wrestle due to injuries, and Ken became Blackwell's tag team partner, with the two heels working as the Sheiks. The Sheiks were a dominant team that held the AWA World Tag Team Championship an impressive 315 days. Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda. On paper, Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda seemed like one of the 80s top tag teams. They were two-time WWF Tag Team Champions and four-time NWA United States Tag Team Champions in Championship Wrestling from Florida. The U.S. Express was a dynamic team that reflected Gordon Soley's nickname, the Young Lions, that he applied to wrestlers who were on the rise. For whatever reason, though, Windham and Rotunda got lost in the shuffle, and their careers became better known for Barry Windham's singles run, including his time in the Four Horsemen, and Mike Rotunda's later turn as Irwin R. Shyster. You didn't think we were going to say Captain Mike, did you? Hopefully the recent induction into the WWE Hall of Fame will encourage current fans to check out their tag team work. Steve Williams and Ted DiBiase. The pairing of real-life tough guy Steve Dr. Death Williams with second-generation ring general Ted DiBiase was another tag team that featured two opposite styles of wrestlers who complemented each other. In Williams' case, Mid-South wrestling promoter Bill Watts paired Doc and the future $1 Million Man in order to give Williams more seasoning. According to Williams, that was my first real tag team partner. It was like student-teacher. In this business, you learn from a lot of older guys, and that's how I learned. Williams and DiBiase worked as heels initially, enraging fans as they beat up popular teams like the Rock and Roll Express. As often happens, though, fans forgave them for their past sins when they turned babyface and began stomping away at the area's heels. The Williams-DiBiase team enjoyed tremendous success in Mid-South and later the Universal Wrestling Federation, holding the Mid-South Tag Team Championship twice and becoming UWF World Tag Team Champions when the Mid-South Tag Team titles were rechristened to reflect Mid-South's transformation into the UWF. The Killer Bees. Were Jumping Jim Brunzell and B. Brian Blair ever going to win the WWF Tag Team Championship? As noted in our video, 80s teams that were supposed to win the WWF Tag Team titles, the Killer Bees were on that magic list. Whether or not this was just a means of placating the team is anyone's guess. What is known is that Brunzell and Blair formed a terrific team that epitomized the concept of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Working as single stars, it's unlikely Brunzell or Blair would have gotten far in the WWF. However, their Killer Bees tandem won them their fair share of matches, and their use of masks to confuse opponents at key moments in their matches, aka mass confusion, or outright cheating depending on who you believe, added an extra element to their act. Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. Jerry the King Lawler and superstar Bill Dundee spent so much time fighting each other in Memphis's CWA that it's easy to forget that they often teamed up together, and rather successfully, when they put their differences aside. Both men enjoyed success in the tag ranks in the 1970s, 1980s, and even the 1990s, but their greatest success was in the 80s when they held the AWA Southern Tag Team Championship once, one of 4 reigns overall, and the AWA World Tag Team Championship twice. Fans can only wonder how much more success these two frenemies would have had if it wasn't for their love-hate relationship. Then again, if they had gotten along, fans wouldn't have seen the many great matches they had during their various feuds. Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez. Next to the fabulous Freebirds, the second version of the dynamic duo proved the perfect foil to the Von Erichs, as Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams knew how to incite world-class championship wrestling fans and make them pay to see the heels get what was coming to them. Hernandez and Adams adopted the nickname the Dynamic Duo, the same nickname Hernandez and Tully Blanchard had used years earlier. This new version worked closely together on their storylines. During an interview with WrestleLine, Chris Adams explained, "Gino and I came up with all of our angles together, the hair and everything. Ken Mantell was booking. We would put ideas to them, Mantell and Fritz Von Erich, and they would take them to the office, talk them over, and see what would be good and what wouldn't." The dynamic duo only lasted from 1985 to early 1986, but they left their mark on world-class championship wrestling. Adams and Hernandez split up in early 1986, but their feud never gained any traction because Gino Hernandez died in February 1986 at age 28 from a reported drug overdose. The Zambui Express. The 1980s featured some big man teams, with the Zambui Express. Elijah Akeem and Kareem Muhammad stood out from others thanks to their gimmick of being two members of a quasi-Black Panther party. While the gimmick would likely never have flown in contemporary times, this was the 1980s, and Southern promoters had no problem turning wrestlers Ray Candy and Bad Leroy Brown into Kareem Muhammad and Elijah Akeem. Wrestling lore has it that the team was originally called the Zimbabwe Express, but wrestler Blackjack Mulligan just couldn't pronounce the team's name, hence the change to Zambui. Whatever the case, the Zambui Express weren't technicians, but their mix of brawling and blood provided action-packed matches for fans in Memphis, Florida, and other southern promotions. The Fabulous Rougeaus. Jacques and Raymond Rougeau had a successful babyface run that dated back to the 1970s. For whatever reason, though, they didn't click with fans in the WWF, leading to their transformation into the smarmy All-American Boys. Their pairing with Jimmy Mouth of the South Heart made for instant heat, but Jacques and Raymond were equally capable of enraging WWF fans. Jimmy Hart would comment on the team, "They had more heat than anybody in the territory back then. It was just tremendous. The Rougeaus were probably one of the best tag teams because they did everything behind the referee's back. I'd call the referee's attention, and when the referee was with me, they'd do the double kicks on the guys, do the double hip tosses together. They worked as a team really good." Raymond Rougeau stopped wrestling in 1989, but Chuck continued, finding single success in the WWF as the Mountie. What 80s tag teams do you think don't get their due? Share your thoughts in the comment section, and let us know if there's any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.